Hey Taylor, welcome to the EcomCrew podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a blast having you here. We met through MDS, which is the Million Dollar Sellers Amazon group. And so if you haven't heard me talk about that on the podcast before, which means you're probably listening to this for the first time, go over to ecomcrew.com/MDS to find out more about that. Basically, it's a group of people who sell more than $1 million a year on Amazon. It's pretty Amazon focused. There are some people in there that sell on their own stores. But there is a local Las Vegas chapter that I have joined since I have moved to Vegas, and you and I have been going to these meetings. And you were sitting next to me at the last meeting, and I was just like, "Damn, like you got a cool story. It'd be a fun podcast." And you were gracious enough to come do this today.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Yeah. So before we dig too deep into this, I always like to give people just 30 to 60 seconds to kind of introduce themselves, and we'll get into more of the nitty gritty later. But just at a high level. Who are you and what do you sell?
Who am I? So I have been a internet entrepreneur for over 15 years. So first sold more info product type stuff. So did lots of kind of Jeff Walker product launch webinar type stuff in the real estate niche originally. Later on, teaching people how to become internet marketing consultants. Sold training programs around that. But kind of felt that was a rat race. And in 2015, when I saw the Amazon opportunity, the e-commerce opportunity, I jumped into that with my first brand in 2015 and just thought that was just so much better than any of the other things that I had previously done in internet marketing, because it was something that was scalable, really scalable, without me having to, build a huge agency or something like that. So,
yeah. And so rewinding back to 2015, incidentally, that's also when we got into Amazon. We had purchased a company called Ice Wraps that was mostly like 98%, 99% just reselling other people's products, actually 100% reselling other people's products. 99% of it was coming from their own store, but they also had an Amazon account. And so that's kind of how we got into it and started tinkering around with it and making our own private label stuff. So when you found it around that same time, what were your first products that you decided to launch?
So I was very familiar with compression sleeves because I actually, back in 2013, as an internet marketing consultant, banging away on a keyboard 12 hours a day with bad posture, eating lots of inflammatory, unhealthy foods at the time, I developed massive pain and inflammation all throughout my hands, wrists, arms. I didn't know if it was arthritis, carpal tunnel, cubital tunnel. I didn't know what it was. The pain was bouncing around all over my arms. And so I actually had to use a voice dictation software for 2 years just to kind of give my arms a little bit of a breather and figure out how to heal myself. But in the meantime, I had become very familiar with compression sleeves, compression garments, because I was wearing compression gloves, compression wrist sleeve, compression elbow sleeve on both arms just to kind of get by and do my work. So it was something I was very familiar with. And when my business partner on that first business sent me a list of, 10 or 20 potential product ideas at the time, and compression sleeves was on the list, I was like, okay, that one I know. I know it's a good one. I know it's a bad one. I'm familiar with the product. I think I can make a better product. And so it was kind of came naturally like that.
Interesting. So you teamed up with someone else to kind of get into the Amazon game, and they were doing some of the pre-research and sent you a list of ideas. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, so it was actually someone who had seen one of my webinars, one of my internet marketing webinars, and so contacted me and was like, "Hey, I'm in Vegas. I had, it was about some other opportunity which didn't work out, but as we kind of met up and started talking, he was like, yeah, I just went through this ASM course and it was like, 50 hours of something. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, I've been thinking about that Amazon thing, but I don't really have the time to go through 50 hours of a course. So glad you did. Let's partner up. And like, I'm good at copywriting. I'm good at PPC. I'm good at like product ideas. And he was really good at like operations side of things and like knew how to work the Amazon system and create shipping labels and do all that. And I've been fortunate enough that I haven't ever had to really, stay on the phone with Amazon for hours because I had someone like him who could do that. And so I think that's important too, is focusing on what's your unique ability, right? I learned that from Strategic Coach that I was in for many years, like my unique ability and what gives me energy and what I'm good at and what my highest payoff activities are, coming up with new product ideas, innovating on new products, obviously coming up with different sales angles and copywriting and unique selling propositions, which I think today are more important than ever, to come up with something that has some sort of a unique selling proposition and not just the same as every other product on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you remember back to 2015 minutes, going back 7-8 years ago now, which is crazy. Do you remember some of the things that you passed on at that point?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't really remember too much. I think I've honed in on the compression sleeves and I was like, that's the one, man. Like, yeah, I was like probably wearing a compression sleeve at the
Right.
time. So
Right. It sounds like you were kind of like kind of part RoboCop or something. You were just you had your whole body covered in compression sleeves, or like kind of half cyborg or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
we laugh about it now, but it was at the time it was a really really difficult time. Actually, I was actually still in some debt from a previous business, and actually while I was doing pretty well as an internet marketing consultant, I guess by most people's standards. I also had two young daughters at the time who were just born. I think they were 1 and 2 years old at the time. We kind of live a pretty nice, lifestyle. So we have kind of a decent amount of, not like huge expenses, but, maybe $100K a year or more of expenses at the time, and probably more than that now. So it was tough. I didn't have a lot of money. And it was a very, very difficult time. But I always say what I thought was the worst thing that could ever happen to me ended up being the best thing that could ever happen to me. It sent me on a health journey, which also we'll probably get into later, as my new
Yeah,
brand is
absolutely.
health related. So basically my two biggest brands, as well as the journey of healing myself and kind of becoming the biohacker, health expert that I am now, wouldn't have happened if I didn't hit that low point back then.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of joking about it, but I mean, it is quite serious. I was going to kind of transition into that, but I think we all end up going through this phase. I mean, you're younger. Your job requires you to be in a chair and typing and whatever, and it's, as it often gets talked about now, is kind of sitting as the new smoking, and definitely a trap I've fallen into, and trying to do a much better job. It's tough. I mean, like, I still have to be, like, we're both in front of computers right now, and it's tough not to do this in our space. But the reality is that humans aren't made to be typing for this length of time, and there's some random jet outside that's probably coming through the microphone. I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the episode, but I am traveling this week, so I'm not with my typical setup with a nice quiet room and podcast mic and all that. So we'll have a little bit of background noise today. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's definitely for me, it's back in my shoulder, like kind of my neck shoulder area, from having your arm elevated on a mouse, and it can be quite painful. And so, yeah, I was curious, about that list, the things you disqualified. But one of the other things that's just super important is having relatability and understand the products that you mentioned, and having that connection to something that you've been using and thinking through how can you make it better. Definitely, makes the most successful companies. And we'll definitely get into the other thing that you're doing now here shortly. But also, I think, it was a time where there was a lot of runway on Amazon as well, right? I don't know if you could launch those same products today and have
I
the
don't
same
think you could.
success.
I probably
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend getting into that niche now. And I have no vested interest in saying that because I sold the company in 2019. So, but yeah, probably very difficult to get into that niche now. So the timing is certainly a part of it. And I think, trying to keep your finger on the pulse of newer kind of up and coming trends is an important part. If you can, it's an interesting balance, right? Because if you come up with something that's completely new, then there's no search volume for it. No one knows
Right.
about it. No one's searching for it.
Yeah.
But things that everyone is searching for, if it's kind of a saturated product, right? So how do you find something kind of new and innovative, or can you put a new innovative spin on some old type of product and make it better? is really kind of I think the dilemma that, we're all thinking about these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, where in 2015 you could just grab something and not innovate in any way and have success, that has 0% of working today. And even if you work hard to innovate and differentiate, it's still going to be difficult. But you had the foresight back in 2015, and not only a wide open category, or just the platform in general was wide open, but you did make some changes, and you understood the product enough to make those changes. And the thing that's crazy, we'll talk about this now, I guess, but it isn't like you reinvented the world,
Right.
you made subtle changes and that's oftentimes all that's needed. And so, what was it about the products, the wrist, elbow, et cetera, products that you were using that fell short in your mind, and how did you make it better?
It was different for different products. I personally tried on all the products and sized them and felt them myself. By us, one of the big things we differentiated with was using a different type of fabric, as well. So that was one thing. It was like, hey, we have this product, but we're using this special type of fabric. That was one way we differentiated. We also innovated with just kind of different types of new products, different spins on new products. But like you said, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. But an interesting story, kind of going back to what you said about differentiating versus not differentiating. I actually started a second company that I created a second Amazon account, second company at the same time, because I was thinking like, man, I already have all these suppliers. Like, I have this one brand that's like a real brand, and it's like, I had a brand name and that was kind of, I guess kind of well known or in the industry at the time. I at least it had become that. But then I was also like, I have all these suppliers. Like, I could just start this other company and just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and like not have like a real brand. So I basically had a whole bunch of random products that literally we would just like would throw like let's say it was a back brace, and we would like literally was like, okay, well, like I don't have time to waste trying to make a logo here. So like back brace solutions, like have a guy on like, Fiverr make a logo or something and just like stick it on there and throw it out there. And, like you said, back then in 2015, you could do that a little bit to a certain extent, but so kind of same type of products, one with like a real brand differentiating a little bit, and another one just like throwing against the wall what everyone else was selling already. And the one that was the real brand with just a slight differentiation did 5x the sales of the other stuff, right? The other stuff never really got off the ground, only did well because we threw so many darn products up against the wall that like something had to stick, and it was 2015, 16. But eventually it kind of fizzled out, and luckily I was able to sell it in conjunction with my other company. I did a combined sale of the two companies, so I was able to get some value out of that. But eventually the new owners, I believe they shut it down just because it was like a hogwash of just random products, not a one cohesive brand. And I still see that to this day. A bunch of people like don't have a cohesive real brand with products that fit nicely under that brand. They just like, this guy's like, oh, I'm selling my account the other day. I take a look at it. There's like 7 different brands in there with all just random products. And I was just like, what am I going to do with this,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn as well. I think as entrepreneurs, you see something taking off, and you think, rewind back to 2015, and the logic of why you did it makes perfect sense, because I did the same damn thing. You got these products that are doing very well. It seems so easy to just to replicate that and cookie cutter it and launch as much stuff as you can as quickly as you can with really no rhyme or reason. But the reality is that the people who are the most successful are the ones that have like one brand or had one brand and laser focused in on that and really worked on continuing to build that brand story and develop that same customer into a repeat customer and into a brand loyalist versus just selling random trinkets or products on Amazon. It's a very easy trap to fall into, and it's taken me years to kind of claw my way out of that and focus on the brands that we have, and they are very focused now. I mean, we work on making sure that the products that we launch make sense for the brands that we're doing, and I've had to unwind a bunch of mistakes of just throwing random stuff up there, because again, it's infectious when it's working and easy to fall into that trap.
Yep. Yep. And the successful brands that I built, the other thing about them is that all three of them, so two of them have gotten to 8 figures and another one that's a 7 figure brand. And then I also had the Hogwasher products, which I guess you could say was another 7 figure brand. So maybe four in total, but that one kind of, I guess, I guess probably could still be considered a low 7 figure brand if they didn't discontinue it, but it's probably more trouble than it was worth. But the three that have been successful, and especially the two that were really successful, were all where I was literally making products for myself. Like I was the ideal customer.
Yeah.
I wanted to make something better for myself. I was a user. So yeah, I think that's kind of like where I would probably start and where I would advise people to start, and things that they should look for is like, what do you like? What do you use? What do you know about?
Yeah, because you've already put your 10,000 hours into that. That's the thing that I talk a lot about. It's the Malcolm Gladwell effect or whatever. But I mean, if you've put the 10,000 hours into being at a computer and destroying your wrist and your elbow and your shoulders or whatever from just bad posture and bad habits, and then having to buy products to make that better, as someone that's going through that, you're going to relate to that way more than someone who isn't going through that or hasn't gone through that. And it might be subtle. It might be something that you never even fully realize consciously that makes a difference, but it does make a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. I mean, you mentioned changing fabrics. I mean, until you have, some type of compression product on your body for 8-10 hours a day, you won't understand the joys of having something that's kind of hot and sticky and just kind of gets itchy and is miserable on your skin. And so looking through dozens or hundreds of fabrics, whatever that you went through, trying to find something that is going to make that better, is a differentiator, and it might get just slightly better reviews over time because it is a better product and has slightly less returns and have slightly more people telling others about it because it is better. And those slightly things are the things that like add up to be major things over time. And something that when you first get started in this racket, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And another example on the other side of that is like, I tried launching a few like women's beauty skincare products that just completely failed. And I like to think that I'm a pretty good marketer, been doing this for a long time, but like totally failed because I know nothing about women's skincare products, right?
Yeah.
So I had no business trying to launch those products.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention like, what women go through just with beauty in general. I mean, it's a tough world out there, and it's another standard that guys will never fully appreciate. And, it's hard to imagine, being able to do as good of a job at that as someone that has that deep personal connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So before we move off the compression brand, what else did you do in terms of differentiation and changing?
I tried to come up with a unique selling proposition and then just like hammer home that unique selling proposition over and over and over, like why we were better, right, than the competition. So that's another thing I would say is what, and even now when I think about it, maybe kind of a little bit as we transition into my new health company, like I literally I do a lot of thinking time. So maybe that's another kind of high level strategy that I highly recommend a lot of people do. A lot of kind of people in MDS and in the e-commerce community kind of know me as like the morning thinking time guy, the quiet time guy. I often spend every Monday through Friday, once my kids go off to school, I'll typically go outside with my coffee. Luckily, we have great weather here in Vegas. I can get in the sun year round. And I just think and visualize and breathe and meditate and try to think high level. Because if I just jump into my work and do the same busy work every day, then I'm not going to really get out of my head, right? So I want to, really think at a higher level, get out of my head and think about like, so in this thinking time, like high level thinking time, it's like, what can I do to differentiate, right? Like if I'm in supplements essentially, right? Organic superfoods, supplements, things of that nature. And it's like, okay, like why would someone buy my brand versus other people's brands, right? Like, how can I differentiate my brand even more? Like, and so I'm thinking about these things, whereas most people might be like, oh, this supplement, looks like it's taking off on Amazon. Let's just, white label it and throw it on Amazon and see what happens, right? It's like, no, like, so for me, right, like, first of all, it's been an incredible health journey for me. And for me, health is, and it's another thing I realized in my morning thinking time, is that health is the most important thing in your life. And I'm in like some business groups with some very, very high net worth individuals. And it's like, man, this guy's worth like hundreds of millions of dollars, but they don't have their health. And it's like, this guy might pass away at age 65 when he could have lived to age 95 and been there for his kids and spend time with his grandkids. And it's like, wow. So like really thinking on that made me realize like, hey, health is the number one priority. So doing my morning gratitude, meditation, visualization, thinking time, going to the gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours, during the middle of the day to break up my day, and listen to my audiobooks and podcasts where I'm, doing health for my mind and my body. I'm working out my body and my mind at the same time. So for me, listening to audiobooks and podcasts while working out is just one of the most important things you can do in your life. And so that became clear to me, like that's the number one thing, is to prioritize my health. And so kind of taking that back to like the supplements brand. So I think about like, if I don't have a supplement that I sell under my own brand, why do I buy like Bulletproof or Kion, right? These are two brands that I respect. And the answer is because their founders, Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield, have taught me a lot about health. I've been listening to their podcasts for years. They've earned my trust, right? And so then it's like, oh, that's interesting. So how can I earn the trust of my customers? Right. And so obviously now I have my own podcast called the Peak Performance Life Podcast, where I interview different doctors, nutritionists, health experts, things of that nature. And it's a lot of fun. I get to learn and have fun and put out really valuable content for my community, and add value to them, where it's more than just a transactional, like, hey, buy my supplement. On top of that, I look to differentiate as much as I can within the supplement, right? That's why, if everyone else is just selling a regular ingredient, like, is there a version of that ingredient that's organic or whatever, gluten-free or grain-free, or, I follow a paleo lifestyle. So my brand is really kind of like a paleo type of brand. So again, and I am the ideal customer. So when I do product research and look for new products, it's like, what do I want for myself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't advocate for this more, because just as there's several things there. First of all, again, you're the customer, but also it's the long game. You're adding value first. And I think it's really the same method that we do with EcomCrew, right? I mean, people listening to this podcast, it's so interesting when I meet them in person for the first time, or I meet a lot of people in person for the first time at conferences. It's always like the most awkward feeling, because they feel like they know you because you've been in their ears for years, and they feel like they have this relationship with you. You've never met them. And so they're like, hey, like they know where you've been on vacation or what you've been going through, that you just had COVID, or, and they're thanking you for helping them in their business, which is obviously very humbling and awesome, but also just a big realization of how powerful a medium like this is at building trust and relationships. And we do it without any agenda, right? It's just like I turned on the podcast 7 years ago with no agenda. I'll do a podcast and see what happens. But the end result is, when it comes time to sell something, which, I'm a horrible salesperson. I don't have to be a salesperson, because people, have that relationship with you. And the same thing has happened with you, right? I mean, where you buy Bulletproof products because you felt like you had a relationship with them and trusted them enough to, especially when it comes to something like supplements, where you're putting something in your body where it's already kind of nerve wracking of like, is this even good for me? Or what other crap is in here that I shouldn't be taking along with the supplement? And so you develop that level of trust, and hopefully it's not something that the person that's doing that is abusing, but certainly it is super powerful.
Yeah. I have it on my whiteboard actually right here. How can I earn the trust of my customers, right?
Yeah.
How can I earn that trust? What value can I deliver? How can I separate myself from all the other brands that are out there? thinking about the customer and not just transactionally. And yeah, doing a podcast is a big commitment because, in the beginning when you do it, nobody's listening,
Yeah.
And you got to stick with it. And so it has to be something that I believe it has to be something that you're doing for yourself and not just like, oh, I'm going to do this podcast because it's going to, make me money or something like that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was the reason I set out to do it originally is very different than why we continue to do it. It's interesting. I mean, at the very beginning, it was more just like, I want to get better at public speaking and, just several other skills. And I thought it would be an interesting way to grow an audience or that something good could come of it later. But the things that came out of it were very different than what I originally intended. It's quite interesting. But as you said, you got to be doing it for yourself. I mean, I often joke my own mother didn't even bother listening to the podcast to start with. My mother-in-law did, and still does, which is pretty funny. But my own mom didn't even bother listening. And so you're really just kind of talking to yourself, and it really is a very difficult road. And you do have to be able to provide good value. And hopefully over time you get those first couple listeners. And if you are doing something different and special, which is getting harder and harder. I mean, just like Amazon has gotten more and more crowded, the podcasting space has gotten more crowded. You weren't the first person to have a podcast about health issues or being healthy eating and working out and just health in general. And we certainly weren't the first about e-commerce. And so it's just difficult to differentiate yourself and then stick with it, because it is not an easy thing to do. You got to find the guest, you got to find the time to do this. I mean, it is definitely a challenge, and most people often give up before they're successful. And oftentimes the thing that's sad is they don't realize like how close they were to being successful, because it's usually year 2 or 3 before you really see it. And a lot of people give up at month 12 or 18.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that 100%. And now I'm starting to see, wow, my podcast is really gaining momentum. We just had the guests keep getting bigger and bigger, but and then I got a little bit of a bigger guest, and then that kind of got me to get a bigger guest. And then that guest, I leveraged that guest to, put it out there and get bigger guests. So yeah, everything is like a stepping stone. Everything that I've done in the past, I feel like is a stepping stone to where I am today. And now I look at even where I am now and how that's a stepping stone for the next bigger thing that I'm going to do. Another thing we did in our brand to kind of differentiate, I had this really highly produced kind of documentary video that was made. And it's literally like 33 minutes long. And want to hear something funny, something interesting? I didn't know if Amazon would let me do this, but I literally just uploaded the 33-minute documentary video to all my listings as the video. Like we had some crappy little, product video, like just telling the product benefits that are already right there in the bullets and already right there in the other images. And now again, repeated in this other video. And I'm like, how do I do something different than everyone else? Like, how do I get people to actually connect with me and relate with me and hear my story and see that I'm like for real and like see that I actually went through this the hard way and now I know what I'm talking about? And so it was like literally uploaded this thing, and it seems to be working. It seems like we're getting a little bit of bump recently since we added that to the video. I don't know, maybe it's time on page. Maybe people are it's a pretty captivating documentary video. If anyone wants to see it, they could just check out. My brand is called Peak Performance, so on like any peak performance product that you see, you could go on the last thing there and watch the video. And once people start, it has a pretty good watch time for a 33-minute video. So maybe that's helping time on page or whatever. But I think it's more that people are getting to see like, oh wow, okay, this guy's not messing around. Like he's here, for real. He's not just some like gone, here today, gone tomorrow kind of brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to be able to overlay conversion rate over time consumed on that video. And I can't even begin to imagine like how it goes up like a hockey stick at some point past minute 3 to 5 or whatever it is. I mean, if someone's made it through the whole damn video, there's probably something like a 90% conversion rate, right? I mean, you gotta be all in by then.
Right. Yeah. If you watch that 30-minute video and you're still not convinced that my $20 product is the one to buy. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're running out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. I'm just curious about one thing that we didn't cover. You mentioned the compression sleeve business, and kind of the background on that, and that you sold that business. How much time transpired between when you sold that and when you started Peak Performance?
So I had already started Peak Performance like on the side a little bit,
Okay.
because I was actually trying to sell this the compression sleeve brand. I started trying to sell it in 2017. Luckily, we didn't sell it till 2019 because we kept growing it, which is another thing. Again, in my thinking time, I kept thinking about like, and as I mentioned to you before, like I don't do any like hacks rank. First of all, nowadays you'd be crazy to try any kind of rebate ranking campaigns because you'll just get suspended, right? But even over the years, as I saw so many of my friends get like distracted with trying to like do this rebate ranking, this, that hack, whatever. And I was always just like, well, are my images as good as they could be? Okay, check. Is my copy good? Do I have a unique selling proposition? Is my product like as good as or better than the best ones on the market? Like, check. Like, okay, great. Like, and I'm doing everything I can do. Like, I never got caught up with like, I saw more people lose money than make money trying to do all these rebate campaigns where you have to give away all these products and pay a service and do all this stuff. So again, like focusing on the basics, like I think I mentioned to you, like I literally don't know what the BSR is on any of my products. I don't know what my keyword rankings are. I think we have a guy on my team now who does like have our top keywords in some ranking system just in case like sales drop off a cliff for a product, we can go check it, but we don't check it regularly unless there's like some sort of situation where sales fall off a cliff and we want to see what's going on. So again, it's been always back to the basics. And so I was trying to sell from 2017, and back then Amazon businesses were a lot harder to sell. Nobody really like, especially at my size, I had like a boutique investment banking, firm, and I was trying to get kind of a low 8-figure sum for the brand. And the buyers were just like, well, you're all reliant on Amazon. Like, what if Amazon changes something? And I'm like, well, your other brand is all in Walmart, and like
Right.
Walmart could pull the plug tomorrow. So like,
Yep.
like what's the difference? At least I have, 20, 30, 40,000 reviews on Amazon that I don't think they'll just take away, overnight. So anyway, it was just hard to get the people to grasp their head around that. And I probably could have got a higher multiple if I waited till the 2021 boom. Although now the multiples are probably back down to around where I sold it for. So I tried going through a boutique investment banker. It took about 2 years to try to sell it. Finally, ended up selling through Quiet Light Brokerage back in 2019. And so I kind of, when I saw the success, and this is a kind of another thing as an entrepreneur, like when you see something working and you see something is successful, like just double down, triple down, go hard. And so it was like, okay, like I know this Amazon thing is working. I know I'm going to sell this company. I know, like I don't want to wait too long here. So I just kind of reinvested the money that I was making, right? And by the way, I put in over $500,000 to start Peak Performance, and I didn't take out any money for like probably 3 years, maybe more. So it was just all invested in building, launching products, reinvesting, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, supplements is a tough space, and you have to reinvest a lot. So I was kind of doing it on the side, and yeah, that's kind of the answer.
Interesting. And so now I'm hoping the answer is going to be this is all you're doing.
Yeah, it is. I have another smaller brand that we've had also along the way.
You and me both have the same problem. We can't help ourselves.
Yeah. Well, the other one was kind of like, so I partnered with someone where I basically said, he was a good buddy of mine. He was a marketing consultant as well. And he was like, hey man, I'm tired of this rat race of being a marketing consultant and just working for clients. I want to have some equity in something. I see the success you're having. And I was like, well, I have had this idea for this other brand, but like, I don't really have the time to do it. So like, I'll put up the money. Everything that we're doing in Peak Performance, you can just copy those strategies over to that brand. We could even leverage the same designer, the same customer support people, whatever. And I'll give you a percentage of the equity and I'll take a percentage of the equity. And so we have that, and that's worked out well. But by the way, I've done 2 other partnerships like that haven't worked out. So in all fairness, so I'm not like everything is a home run here, like you got to try a bunch of things. And I think that's the unfortunate thing is a lot of people will just try one thing and fail, and then that's it. They give up. Right. And so sometimes you need to try multiple things. And Now and this might be interesting for your listeners in terms of like, okay, yeah, you started back in 2015 in the good old days. Like, what about now for me or whatever, right? And so I'll tell you what I'm doing now is I'm actually working on a deal. I mean, we're going to do it. It's just a matter of writing up the contract and all that. With a huge influencer who's highly, highly respected, very well known, has a big following of his own, a big podcast and email list and all that of his own that we'll be able to leverage. And we're going to partner to launch a brand together there, where I can leverage my team that already knows how to run my systems. You know, Amazon Business is a beautiful thing. If you don't get distracted, which I have many times and still do from time to time, get distracted with, oh, well, let's try the TikTok thing. Let's do Facebook ads. Let's do, all this kind of stuff. And after I blow a bunch of money and see that it doesn't work, I ended up just coming back to what has always worked for me. And so Amazon, to me, FBA is just a beautiful, beautiful business. It's so kind of like, everything is just so streamlined. And it's, for me, it's like such a high payoff for a low amount of time. And so, but right now it is hard. I tried starting another new brand recently with no list, no influencer, just like, hey, let me just start this brand. And I'm like, oh, look at the branding. It's beautiful. And like the product, whatever. Right. And we launch it and like total flop. Right. And so I think these days you have to have something, either some point of differentiation, some special kind of product, or if you're going to do a skincare line, maybe partner with a famous dermatologist or something, right? Or a famous doctor or like a famous whatever, and ideally those people have a list or have a following already that you can leverage. And so that's my plan here, is to launch this brand that I have very, very high hopes for, because we can launch on his podcast and through his email list. We can drive that traffic to Amazon to buy the products and then really shoot up the rankings, hopefully, but by driving thousands of sales, hopefully, from off Amazon to Amazon, which would get us our reviews quicker, which will launch the product quicker. So I think thinking like that. And I think it also takes away the excuse of like, oh, well, I don't have any expertise or I don't have the money or whatever. It's like, well, you can raise money. You can partner with an expert, right? So there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's kind of what I would probably be. That's what I am doing now if I was to start a new brand now.
Yeah. And it marries, two disciplines that need each other badly, right? I mean, you don't have the list, as you kind of mentioned, or the audience. And they don't have the expertise of how to create products or sell things on Amazon or on Shopify or whatever it might be. And they're kind of sitting on a gold mine or over top of a gigantic oil well, but don't have the drill bit, and you have the oil. And I think it's a great partnership. I think that, these types of things are going to become more and more popular in like 2023 and beyond, because as you said, even with all the expertise in the world that you might have, getting into some of these more competitive things is getting near impossible without those additional assets. And so either you start from nothing and wait 2 years to build those assets, or you can go to someone who already has them and kind of shortcut that and give them a piece of it. I do believe still, though, because we've had success in some of the lower volume stuff, where there isn't a lot of competition, being able to launch things. But certainly if you're going after supplements or makeup or skincare type of things, I mean, having somebody that's already really respected, that has tens or hundreds of thousands of people on their list and tons of reach, definitely makes tons of sense.
Yeah, there's certainly little niches that people can find, smaller niches, little niches. I think at this point, I'm only looking at things where I think, hey, can that be an 8-figure plus business? Yeah. Whereas other people might be happy, putting 10, 20 grand a month in their pocket. And I think there is certainly many opportunities like that still out there, finding those little niches. And also still trying to improve on the products that you make there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. Well, we're already significantly over. I could sit here and talk to you about this for hours, but I know you got other things going on. So I really appreciate it. People are looking to maybe get more info from you. I don't think you're really selling anything or have an agenda, but if there's anything you want to plug, go for it.
Peak Performance Life podcast. If you're listening to podcasts and you want to listen to a podcast about health, mental health as well as physical health, I have biohackers. We have leaders in top Navy SEAL Mark Devine, John Assaraf, as well as other health experts. So check it out. And Peak Performance is the brand. If you want to see the documentary video, or if you ever want to buy any organic superfoods or supplements or whatever, check us out.
Yeah, buypeakperformance.com. Definitely go check it out. Support other people in the community. I always try to, when I can, buy stuff from other people that I know in this community because it is, every little bit helps. And
I make the products for myself. I give them to my kids, my family, my friends. The quality is, we third party test everything to ensure that they're completely safe. Again, things that one of the things like, how can I differentiate? How can I make people trust more? So, yeah.
Excellent, man. Can't thank you enough. We're recording this before Thanksgiving, so I'll say happy Thanksgiving. I think it comes out after Thanksgiving. So if you're listening to this, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And for you, Talor, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.